Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just waiting for a few more people to join. Sorry that we're a bit late. We had some technical issues. So today we're doing a talk about, well, really an interview with Harpreet Kaur from babybrainmemoirs. So she's really an advocate for kind of looking into kind of postnatal depression, and also because Benji's son also has Down syndrome, she's an advocate for kind of looking at Down syndrome awareness as well. So we'll wait for Benji to join, and then we've got a few questions to ask her in terms of postnatal depression, also Down syndrome awareness, and how she feels kind of us as a culture or a society can make Down syndrome awareness more, Down syndrome individuals more included in our society. So I think it's really important. And obviously also in terms of postnatal depression, I think in light of the recent events where unfortunately an Indian lady did commit suicide due to the lack of understanding and acceptance and support she had through postnatal depression. Obviously I think it's really relevant that we talk about that and touch upon that as well. So I think Benji's just requested to join. Just waiting for Benji to connect. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Benji. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Boiling. It's so hot already, and it's
It really
like
is.
10 in the morning.
It really is. Sorry for the bit of the delay. We had some technical issues, but thanks so much for taking time out to join us. We really appreciate you talking to us this morning. Just a quick intro that I've done is really just talking about kind of what ARPG stand for, and that really amazing work that you do with kind of being an advocate for not only just postnatal depression, but obviously more importantly as well Down syndrome awareness, which I think it's just not talked about, and I think it's really important kind of the work that you're doing to bring that awareness to the forefront. Personally, as a teacher, I think even though we get taught about that, having that inclusivity within the classroom setting, not much depth has gone into about specific needs. So I think the work that you're doing is really important, not only for me from an education perspective, but also for you, to spread that awareness within our community as well, because I think it's important that everyone has that awareness, because at the end of the day, it could be someone's cousin, it could be someone's brother or child, or a family friend that has a child with Down syndrome. I think it's really important that we are able to create that really inclusive environment for that child. So Benji, I'm just going to hand over to you for a bit, so maybe just an introduction about kind of the work you do and things like that.
So firstly, thank you for having me. So I guess I started my blog just after I had Arjun, my firstborn, because I wasn't feeling quite right. I wasn't feeling how I'd imagined myself to feel after giving birth to my first child. I was really excited while I was pregnant, and then he came along and I just felt very disconnected, and I couldn't quite, link the fact that he'd lived inside me with the fact that this little human being is now here. It's the same baby, and my confidence was really low, and I just really struggled with my feelings, with my thoughts. I felt quite annoyed with myself. It was a vicious cycle, because you kind of become your own worst enemy. And though I had all the support around me, I had Weetham, my husband, I had my sisters, and my sister-in-law, still I felt really lonely, because it kind of felt like I was almost intimidated by their hands-on approach as well. I struggled. I'd look at them and think, oh my God, you're so confident. Why am I not? Why am I not able to? Why don't I feel like I can do this? And I guess I started the blog just as an outlet for my feelings, just to kind of put pen to paper and yeah, and I was quite surprised with how quickly, I was receiving, so, and I still do receive so many messages from women saying, we feel exactly the same way. Some women do have the support, some women don't have the support, but it's just crazy with, recent events, especially with Nimai. It's just so heartbreaking to see that this is what, what it could result in. And I guess when I had Sergeant, so we went on to have our second child, and I just wanted to give Arjun a sibling. I wanted to grow our family, and so we went and had a second baby. And when he was born, I felt all those emotions that I thought that I'd feel on becoming a parent. And I felt ecstatic, elated. I felt content. I was so grateful to Maraj for finally giving me everything that I had wished for. And our family just felt so complete. And literally, I think it was about 10 hours later, the pediatrician walked in and she was just like, oh, is your husband here? And I was like, no, he's gone to get food. I didn't think anything of it because I was just so buzzing. I was just so happy. And she said, can you call him back? And again, I went and called him, not thinking anything. And he came, and as soon as he walked in, she said, oh, do you notice anything different about your son compared to your other son? And Breatham just blurted out, he's got Down syndrome. And I was just like, what? Like, what on earth are you saying? And she turned around and said, I'm so sorry. And I just couldn't believe it. What happened, what unfolded after that was just pure chaos. It was like living a nightmare. This child that had brought me so much joy just seconds before suddenly felt like a stranger. And as we kind of, Breatham put out a blog post, which lots of the people that follow the blog are familiar with, to tell everyone that, our son has Down syndrome. And I didn't know that he was going to do that, but he did it. And, even the words that he shared, as much as I felt, oh wow, like he is on board and he does love me and he does love our son, there was something there that made me feel very lonely. It made me feel like, Harps, we're all behind you. You've got this, we're all behind you. And I just felt like, why is this my problem? Like, how comes it's, being put onto me? And, as much as he dealt with it very differently, he was very introverted. I was very, I was crying a lot. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted reassurance. I needed reassurance. I just needed to know it was going to be okay. I was terrified that I was going to lose my husband. I was worried about what this would mean for Arjun. I was absolutely distraught at the thought of, Arjun. I didn't really think about Sarjan that much, quite selfishly, but it was just absolute chaos. And my sisters were incredibly hands-on. My sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, they were very supportive. And, for them, it was just, he's our nephew, and we don't care about anything. He's our nephew, and that's what we see him as. And despite having all that love and support, the parents all reacted very differently. So my mum and dad, they're very much connected with the Gurdwara. They're very my mum wakes up at 2 a.m, she's at the Gurdwara by 3. My dad wakes up at 4, he's at the Gurdwara by 5. And they have a very heavy presence, and for them everything is just about accepting Maraj's hukam and providing that support for us. And I remember when they told, they went and gave out laddus just like they did with Arjun, and they told everyone, yeah, we've had a grandson and he's so cute and he's got Down syndrome, and they're very upbeat about it. And I really do believe that the way in which they delivered the news would have an impact on the way people respond to it. Yeah. Whereas with me, I was constantly scanning for people's reactions. I was scanning for the way in which, people were reacting to it. Some people were like, oh my gosh, congratulations, it's amazing. And that's what I needed. And there were other people that were like, I'm so sorry, I don't know what to say. And I was just like, that made me feel really bitter and angry. Like, absolutely. What are you sorry for? Mm. Yeah, and it felt like you're just relieved that it's not you. Yeah. That's how it felt. And I'm being very open here. It was a really tough kind of time for me. And I was really grateful for my in-laws, and I still am. From as young as 2 weeks old, they were incredibly hands-on with Sergeant. He's been staying there since he was 2 weeks old, you know, because I didn't feel like I could be his mother. I didn't feel like I could take care of him. I had the darkest thoughts, and you know, one of my very kind of prominent thoughts was, you know, should I just, sorry, one second. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, that sounds nice. Well done, Arjun. Yeah, so one of the thoughts was, you know, just the easiest solution seems to be to just end your life. This isn't something that you want. This isn't something that you've chosen. This isn't something that you signed up for. So you can't get rid of it. I can't get rid of Sergeant. He's here now. There's no going back. You know, Arjun was so smitten and so besotted with his brother. And for me, it was just like, I don't want this. I just want to be free of it. I just want to be done with it. And I was constantly surrounded by people and, you know, this positive reinforcement. I was constantly surrounded by people trying to uplift me. You know, my sisters were constantly by my side. They would drop everything. The moment they had an inkling that I wasn't okay, they would drop everything. You know, one of my sisters, she works within mental health, and her work was so supportive, and there was so many times that she just left work to come to see that I was okay. And I think for me, we've got a train track right behind our house. It was very simple. I'd thought about it more than once, and I think the thing or the person that saved me was Arjun. It was his love and I needed him, and he was there for me. And I feel so guilty even talking about that now, to be honest, because he was so little himself. He was 2.5. He was probably very confused by what was going on around him. You know, I don't remember that time of him growing up either. It's kind of like a mental block for me. And it was literally Arjun that saved me at that time. And obviously, you know, Maharaj, you know, one thing I never questioned was why. I never asked the question, why had this happened to us? I asked the question, how had this happened to us in terms of, you know, science or, you know, we had a 1 in 100,000 chance. How comes this has happened to us? But I think for me, I've been through so many things in our life that has shown me that God is there. And I think I never questioned why, because I knew that this is just the way it's meant to be. The fact that I had such a low chance made it a little bit easier to accept, because, you know, I think the consultant explained it to me. She said it's like winning the lottery, because your chances were so low, but it happened to you.
Benji, I think that's so beautiful that I was watching, I think it was on Benji's, recently you did the live takeover, I think it was yesterday, the day before.
Yeah.
And I think the way in which you put it was kind of hitting that jackpot of that 1 in 100,000 chance. And I think that's such a beautiful way of viewing it, because I don't think everyone can do that and have that mindset. Actually, it was such a small chance, but I'm lucky that I got that opportunity. And you're lucky also, you're saying that you had that server to take home to your home, that server to take home. So I think that's a beautiful thing, the way in which to view things is to completely flip it on its head. And in terms of things, what you said about learning so much from your first child as well, you know, for our perspective, you know, our charity is all about empowering women, and through that, empowering mothers to look after their children, and obviously viewing all of those children as Martha Sahib Kaur's children. So I think that's a beautiful thing that you touched upon it, and also not being ever no one's too young or too old to learn from each other and have that integration as well, which I think is a beautiful thing. Sorry to jump in like that, but I think you know, another thing you said is kind of looking at those additional needs and it only being a small part of him. So in terms of kind of wider, I know you touched upon it briefly, but in terms of kind of looking at it in societal, how much kind of support do you get within kind of, if you look at kind of wider society, and then looking at kind of Punjabi culture, how do you feel about going to a Gurugar with him, for example? Do you feel like you get that support? Do you think he's accepted now?
I think when he was first born, I was absolutely terrified of taking him to the Gurdwara. The Gurdwara is something that's incredibly close to my heart. It's my safe haven. It's where I go when I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I walk in and I say, Maharaj, I'm, you know, Mother, Father, I'm taking my stresses, I'm leaving them with you. Help me figure this out. And I walk out and I just feel so much lighter. So such a, you know, I'm not Amritdari, I haven't taken Amrit, but there is a massive connection that I have with Gurbani and with the Gurdwara. So for me, when Sarjan was born, I was like, that's it, I've lost that part. You know, he's never going to be accepted. You know, he's going to be that kid that everyone's like, oh God, what is he doing? And it was my dad that said to me, you know, what was Guru Nanak Dev Ji's first teaching? And it was all about, you know, equality. And he is the one that reminds me that, you know, we are all Guruji's creations. We are nobody to judge anyone. He has as much of a place in the Gurdwara as anybody else does.
Absolutely.
If, you know, and that is what keeps me strong. And also, I think I realized quite quickly that if I don't take him to the Gurdwara, how can I then expect the Sangat or the Gyanis or, you know, everybody to be used to him? I can't just, that's me being ignorant otherwise, you know, just expecting everyone to just accept him. It doesn't quite work like that. So I think it also helps, you know, there's Sarabjit Benji, Kamaljeet Benji that are further along in this journey, and watching them is so inspiring, and it gives me hope and courage and the strength to kind of continue. So Sargent's still very little yet, so he's 3.5, and we went yesterday actually to the Gurdwara, and he was just being such a little pickle. You know, he loves going to the Gurdwara. He has definitely got some special link to God. I don't know what it is, but it's just very unique. And we went, and he sat nicely upstairs. You know, we sit for 5 minutes. I don't think they can handle more than that. And then we went to have langar, and he's sitting there, and literally he'd have a boogie, and then he'd get up, toddle over to the door, and stand there and look at me like, I know you're getting annoyed. And I was just like, you know what? I could have gotten quite wound up, but I just reminded myself that this is nothing to do with him having Down syndrome, because Arjun used to do exactly the same thing. Yeah. And I think this is the thing with society, and also me, I'm guilty of it. You know, when there is kind of behavior like that, it's easy to say it's because he's got Down syndrome, you know, he's not listening. No, it's not. He's a child, and that's what children do. And actually, even if he is running around, you know, that's also his home, and that's his parents' home. And just like he would do going to Nana Nanni's, you know, running around, or Dada Daddi's, I'm okay with him doing that as long as he's not being disruptive or causing havoc. You know, obviously I try and discipline my children, but at the same time, I don't want it to be where I'm constantly having a go at them.
Because a child's a child.
You know, yeah, exactly. And then they just don't want to go to the Gurdwara anymore. Sure,
because you put them off, yeah.
But yeah, I think we've had support from Singh Sabha Gurdwara, from Ramgarhia Gurdwara. We've had it from Sant Baba Isha Singh Ji's Samagam organisers, and the Sikh channel. So there are loads of, I'm so fortunate and thankful that, you know, those organisations are taking an interest and supporting us, because I think there's so much more that can be done. I think in the Gurdwara especially, it's a perfect place for those with additional needs, or, you know, not even those with additional needs, all children, to learn life skills. So, you know, washing pandir and doing seva. So I really think that that's a perfect platform to do that.
Definitely, absolutely. And I think, you know, again, what you touched upon is kind of having that inclusivity where he feels like he can go and feel normal and not feel like, I think, especially as he gets older, and, you know, not feeling like that he's defined by that additional need, which I think is a huge, you know, factor in him building that confidence probably as well. Yeah. To feel like, you know, he's not just defined by his Down syndrome. You know, he can go off and have ambitions and have goals, just like any other child would, which I think is really important. So, you know, even coming back to kind of Mother Sahib Kaur, you know, very much promoting that everyone is inclusive, all children are the same, all children deserve that same love and support and affection. You know, even to the fact of Mother Sahib Kaur, you know, looking at Hindu girls, not just helping our own community, but looking at Hindu girls and helping support them and doing their marriages and things like that. You know, years and years ago. So I think there's something that we can learn from that. And
I think Mother Sahib Kaur as well, the strength and the courage, all of those things. And, you know, a mother's love is, you know, unconditional. So even though I was going through a tough time with Sarjan, even in his first few days, he ended up in neonatal, and there was a part of me, an innate part of me that was like, you need to breastfeed him, you need to provide for him. You might be rejecting him right now, but there was a part of me that still wanted to care for him.
Yeah.
And now I'm the fiercest, like, you know, I will not tolerate anything being said. And I never imagined that I'd be like that with him. But somewhere, somehow, that courage and that strength has come.
Definitely shows the kind of the strength of motherhood, and like you said, that innate kind of bond that you have with that child. So touching upon motherhood a bit, you mentioned a few qualities. How would you define motherhood as a whole?
The most challenging journey that you will embark on, but the most fulfilling. It's not easy. It's constantly kind of, it's like this, you know, it challenges you, and every single stage of your children growing up, there'll be a different challenge. I always say this, I laugh about this, I say, you know, when Sergeant was born, I assumed, oh my God, it's going to be this really difficult child, I don't know how I'm going to cope. And actually, it's Arjun that's probably my challenging child. Sergeant is actually pretty chilled out. He has his challenges, but you know what, it's just kind of remembering my motto is nothing lasts forever. You know, nothing lasts forever. That includes the cuddles, that includes, you know, them sneaking in your bed, that includes the tantrums, that includes, you know, whatever stage they go through, nothing lasts forever. So it's just making the most of it, and the tough times, it's remembering that this too shall pass.
I agree with that. So I think that's beautiful, a beautiful message. And it's funny because we were talking about it with my mum, because I'm one of four. And at one stage, you know, my sister was getting married. I was in university, and she had one in secondary and one in primary. So she had the whole spectrum of different challenges going on. But like you just said, Benji said, you know, the stages will move on, they'll progress, and you'll come out of those challenges, which I think is a really positive thing. So you touched on also kind of inclusivity within our society. How old is Sergeant Benji? Is he not yet in school or nursery?
But he's not in school yet. So he's 3.5. He's been going to nursery since he was 1.
Okay.
To a private nursery, and there were a few kind of you know, comments made about that, like, oh, is he really ready? And as parents, we were like, well, we want him to have the same opportunity as Arjun. He's an extremely resilient child. He enjoys being around other children, and it was absolutely the right decision for him. He starts school nursery in September, which is nerve-wracking because it's a completely different setting. But in terms of inclusivity, I think children are probably who we can learn from. They're very innocent. They don't they might ask questions, but the questions will be in a very innocent way. And, you know, the nursery tried their best. I think the thing with Sergeant is he's just like this little magnet. He's got such a nice energy, and you just end up gravitating towards him and wanting cuddles and just sort of being around him, that sometimes his needs kind of, you know, those needs, not just his emotional needs, but his educational needs kind of get a little bit missed, because it's like, oh, he's so sweet and he's playing with that so sweetly. So, you know, so yeah, that's kind of, I think in small nursery it'll be different because it's more of a formal setting. But yeah, I think in a societal kind of, within society, I think there's so much work to still be done. We do our best, but I think trying to tackle the older generation is kind of, I might be wrong here, but it's kind of a misboat now. I think for them, every person with an additional need is, you know, a simpleton, basically. They don't really try and distinguish, they don't try and understand. They're kind of written off before they're even given a chance. I think the education lies at our generation level, so educating our parents as much as you can, educating our siblings, our friends, educating our children. I think educating our children and encouraging them to be friends with those with additional needs, to understand that we're all different. So I'm actually releasing a children's book about Guru Nanak Dev Ji in a couple of months, with basics of Sikhi, and that's, my dad shares a lot of knowledge, so he does all the school tours at Havlokra Gurdwara. He does some of those, and his message was so important to me to echo. So we've created a little simple children's book, and even in that I've illustrated, you know, those with additional needs, so a wheelchair, for example, just to show that we're all different and we should celebrate difference. And I don't think that's really ingrained. And sometimes it's out of fear because parents don't know how to respond to their children. So with me, I always say, you know, if you have a question, just ask. There's no question that's silly or, doesn't answer. Some of my cousins' children, they'll ask me questions like, Muffy, why doesn't he talk yet? And I say it's because, he will learn to talk, but he's really cool. Like, he can do sign language, and then they'll get really into that. And, it's about speaking to children in a way in which they understand as well.
Allowing them to, I suppose, embrace those differences as well. And I think, like you said, you're educating them at the same time. So those questions, I think, come from a place of, wanting to learn more, and not in a kind of a place of arrogance and ignorance. Whereas I think, that can stem from where, where adults have that, that arrogance or ignorance about these things, and it coming from maybe more nasty place where children will have that innocence about, okay, they're a bit more inquisitive about why, and why is this like this, or why does this happen this way. So I think that's a really good message that you put through, that obviously trying to educate, not just older generations, but ourselves and younger generations as well. What do you think we could do more, maybe, Benji, about, if we look at kind of the kind of umbrella term of additional needs, what do you think we could do more as a community to kind of be more accepting? Because obviously there's so many additional needs, ranging from mental health issues we touched upon, postnatal depression and things like that, all the way through looking at maybe Down syndrome, or even things like dyslexia or autism, things like that. What do you think we can do as a community to be more accepting of individuals that come with additional needs?
I think it's being inclusive. So if there's things like Punjabi school, or I don't know, I know these things are sometimes charity based, but if there's groups that are for children, to educate them on Sikhism and Gurbani and things, I think being inclusive and actually advertising that you're inclusive, because parents like me are very hesitant, because I don't know how much he's going to be accepted, and he's a little bit different, and last year we were going to Kiddy Sangat, which is local to us, and even that I was nervous, but actually Sergeant really enjoyed it, and it's unfair for him to miss out on it because of others' ignorance. I think actively encouraging, and so when there's when you're putting up posters or whatever, or there's an event taking place, include those with additional needs within your make it inclusive. Don't, I think having more talks, now that there's more kind of youth organizations that are present, I think they're more kind of inclined to pushing topics like this forward. So educating the Sangat, having speakers, and just putting it out there, just being more inclusive with the messaging, I think is number one. And I think number two, making provision. So if you have for example, if at the Gurdwara, I don't know, there's Punjabis going afterwards, they will go and do Seva the Budget, making sure that those children are also included. And it's just being what already exists. It's just including them in what already exists. It's not necessarily creating new things. It's just bringing them into, and I think, gyanis and things like that, obviously educating, making sure that we're fortunate because my mum and dad are part of the Gurdwara. The gyanis have kind of grown up with the boys, they came to do the Ardas at home when they were born. So we're fortunate in that way, but I'm sure even they're thinking, what is going on? I'm sure they've got their standard word that they use for anyone with additional needs. And it's just, educating. I think translating things into Punjabi is a big thing. That's a huge thing. I'm obviously I won't be able to do that. My Punjabi is very basic. But just things like that kind of reach multiple levels and generations.
It's just adapting it slightly almost, isn't it?
Adapting it,
Yeah. I was thinking, Benji, you just mentioned kind of, have that, maybe like you use the example of Kiddie Sangat. For us, we hold camps and things like that. So for us, I think it's important, even the thing I'm learning from you now, just adapting things slightly so we know that we've got staff with us that are able to provide that additional support when we've got children in our care. So, we're we're blessed enough to have, a lot of single mothers that work in education as well, will have that awareness. So, just to make sure we have that, and I think you touched upon when you did the takeover as well about sign language and the importance of that as well. And I don't think that's pushed enough as well within education. Myself being a teacher, we're not trained in sign language, and we don't know when we will get a child, within our care that does. And I think it's only fair that we provide that equal program where we are able to communicate to all. So, for example, if we had a child with dyslexia and needed something printed on blue paper to be able to read it, we provide that. Whereas if someone needed a different form of communication, maybe we should, push that more forward to say that actually we are, for example, me working in college, we are a college that provides that communication for all and enable people to have that strong communication to enhance their learning. So I think, that's an important message as well. What do you think about sides of communication? You touched upon kind of messaging and things. Do you think that's an important thing to push?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sign language is, it's not only for children with Down syndrome, it's a whole, it's a whole multitude of people that could benefit from it. And I think it's just not the school point that you've touched upon is actually very real. It's not just in your setting. It's, my sister's a TA, and she's going to be working with a little girl with Down syndrome next year. And she said, the teacher doesn't know any sign language. And I just thought that's so sad, because yes, the little girl will have access to you as her TA, but she's then just limited to you. That's it. Like, the teacher who's supposed to lead the classroom isn't equipped with that knowledge and the skills. And sign language is so simple. I mean, especially for children, it's communicating basic needs. Sergeant probably knows about 50 signs, and they're all really basic, like eat, or cereal, or crisps, or whatever it is. It's just very basic. It's not a whole sentence that you need to know. The important one. It's just communicating basic needs, because that can lead to behavioural issues if they're not able to do that.
Definitely.
And it's also being inclusive. Like, imagine you weren't able to speak yet, and you wanted to tell your teacher something and you just couldn't.
Frustration's going to come from that.
Would be, and it's same with us. Whenever he kind of has a meltdown because he's trying to tell us something and I don't know what he's trying to tell me, I have to take a deep breath and think, okay, if this is hard for you, imagine how hard it is for him.
Definitely.
To just not be able to communicate that with you. So I think it's really, really important. I mean, I'd love to say, it'd be great if one day in the Gurdwara things were that much, that we progress that much, but I think that for the time being, that's a little bit wishful thinking, maybe. Years down the line, maybe. But I think in camps and things, you could definitely have, even if it's just one civil that knows it, and I'm sure there's lots of people that do know sign language, to kind of just communicate basic things. I think it's massive. Or to even be able to understand it. Definitely. In case somebody with speech delay, they can communicate back to you. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think, like you touched upon before, it is very much about including people in everyday life, not making them feel different because of their additional needs, and not allowing themselves to define themselves by that additional need as well. I think, like you mentioned before, Benji, we're very quick to say, okay, that person's got Down syndrome and that's what they're defined by being that. But we wouldn't say that to anyone else. We wouldn't say, for example, okay, that person's defined them by their religion, or by their skin colour, or by the colour of their hair or eyes, for example. So why should we define someone by an additional need? And I think it's very much a kind of the term, quite like the term additional need, because it's something additional. It's not taken away from them. It's something extra that they've got. So I think, I think that's come a long way as well from recent years, especially probably, early 90s and things, where children were kind of secluded, and it was seen very much, like you mentioned, as burden. There's very many things to celebrate from additional needs as well. So I think that's an important thing. In terms of if I just switch back to kind of looking at postnatal depression and mental health as well, because I think that's really relevant as we look at the case of Nima, who sadly passed away due to, that lack of understanding and support because of postnatal depression. What would your message be for parents that are caring for young children with additional needs and kind of need that mental support? What would your message be to them?
It's a tough one because it's a whole minefield. I think creating your own support network, so connecting with other parents. This is the beauty of social media. I was so fortunate that so many mums reached out to me because of the blog, and said, "We've got you. We promise you it's going to be okay." And literally, I was leaning on them constantly. And now I'm that mum that can offer that support to new mums with children with additional needs. I think that is what gets me through. It's having that support network. You know, when we're doing I'm doing EHC now, and I just think, I'll just message one of the mums saying I'm feeling like absolute, rubbish today. It's so stressful. And it's like, don't worry, Harps. I get it. But it's going to be okay. Just remember, this is what you need for yourself. And it's like, thank you. I needed that reminder. So it's creating your own network, reaching out to people on social media. Sometimes when you're in a low place, you don't feel like going out and meeting people. I didn't want to go out and go to support groups. I didn't want to surround myself with parents of those with Down syndrome, because I didn't want that to just be my whole life, and it isn't our whole life. Yes, I think social media is really powerful. Speaking to your health visitor as well, or to the doctor, is always a good one if you feel like you need that extra bit of support. There's no harm in it, nothing wrong with it. I've had lots of different therapies, and one of my biggest fears was, oh my God, my children are going to get taken away from me, because I thought I was an unfit mother. No, they're there to work with you. They're not there to take your children away. They're there to support you, and it could literally be life-changing. And yeah, I think just confiding in someone that you're close to. It doesn't have to be your partner. It doesn't have to be your siblings. It could be a friend. This is why I've created spaces like the Baby Brain Tea and Talk Lounge. It's just to create that little network, that safe space. And I think, yeah, just reaching out to someone and letting them know how you feel, and just to remind yourself that you won't feel like this forever. You won't. It's not a linear journey. It's not, oh, I'm fixed now, I'm fine. It's very much up and down, but you can do it. You can do it. And I think, yeah, just creating your own network is massive.
Fantastic, Benji. And also another thing as well, prior to kind of having your children, was there any kind of experiences you had with mental health issues? I think a lot within my generation is that experience that if I've already experienced mental health issues, will those kind of be enhanced or be worse once I've had children? So I think a lot of fear within my generation is, okay, maybe I've experienced depression or anxiety prior to having children. Will that mean that I'll definitely have those issues once I've had children? What would you say to that?
I did have, after I had quite a bad car accident in India in 2009, and after that I got really horrible separation anxiety from my parents. My mum was with me in the car accident, and after that I would cry for days just at the thought of my mum and dad dying, which my mum and dad are very real, and they're very much like, well, if life pans out the way it should, then we should die before you, and come on, you've got to be real. And so I did have mental health. I did have challenges, and I did have therapy for that anxiety. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not sure if it automatically makes you more prone, but I would assume it does. So I was aware that, I could potentially, I've never been afraid to admit, I don't know why, I've never been afraid to say I'm struggling, like I'm struggling. I don't think there's any harm in it. I don't think it's a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of strength to be able to recognize that,
Definitely.
hold on, something's not quite right, and I'm not the master of all trades, and I need a little bit of extra help, and I'm going to take that. And also the second time around when I was pregnant, the hospital, the maternity kind of staff knew that I was already at an increased chance of getting postnatal depression again, and I had early intervention. That wasn't something I requested, that was something they put into place. But obviously nothing could have prepared me for what was going to happen. So yeah, I think you probably are, without freaking you out. I mean, it can go either way. I know people that have had mental health issues before, and after having children, they're completely fine. It's very,
I suppose
it can happen to anyone.
Yeah,
it can happen to anyone.
And I think that's an important message to put out there, you know,
Yeah,
that unfortunately no one's protected from these things.
no,
Just like just like your physical health really as well, you're not guaranteed anything in life. So I
exactly.
think, like you said, you know, ensuring that you have the measures if it does happen, like that support network, like a supportive family is really important. And I think
Yeah,
you touched upon early kind of, you know, educating others around you as well. I think that's important in terms of not only obviously of additional needs, but also mental health issues. And a lot within our community looking at kind of the range of mental health issues that exist, and looking at, I think, people educating themselves how to respond to people with mental health issues as well.
yeah,
You know, looking at the case of Nima and feel like she couldn't turn to a family because they didn't quite understand, or they didn't know how to provide that specific support. So I think that's you know, really important as well, that we educate ourselves how to respond to these
yeah,
cases, because it's not discriminative, as someone's just mentioned down here in the comments. You know, it can in fact affect anyone at any time. And you know,
yeah,
looking at the cases within mothers as well, you know, it's so unfortunate that we did lose Nima, and there wasn't enough support and understanding within our community about how to respond or how to create that bubble or support network for her.
yeah.
That's an important thing. And I think also within the elder generation, so obviously we within our community, we do look to you know, to that kind of our elders or our in-laws for that support mechanism, also kind of the role that fathers play as well within that.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that? How did you feel about kind of your husband's role within your postnatal depression
Um,
journey?
I don't think he really got it. I don't think he understood what was going on because he was absolutely besotted with Arjun. He was so into him and just besotted. But I think he might have gone through a little bit of something then as well, because when Arjun was born, I immediately, literally within seconds, I slipped into unconsciousness and I wasn't very well. My blood pressure dropped. And he said suddenly there were doctors everywhere. They told me to get out. They took Arjun off me because his temperature dropped. So I think for him, he was just terrified of
Yeah.
losing both of us. And so he was kind of, but his manifested in a way of, I'm so grateful you're both okay. And it didn't trigger, I can't speak for him, but in terms of me, I don't know if he entirely got it, but he was incredibly supportive with Arjun. He was, you know, he was very hands-on. He made sure I was eating. I was physically unable to do a lot because I'd had the C-section, and you know, he'd help me walk around. He was very supportive in the way in which he could be. So I relied more on my sisters because I think as females, maybe they got it more. When we had Sargent, Boytham went through his own depression and he couldn't be there for me in the way in which I needed. So I felt quite lonely. But then I had other people that were there, which was fine because that worked. And I also appreciate the fact that he had to get through it in a
Sure.
way that he needed to.
Coping his own way, yeah.
Yeah, in his own way. And we're quite different. But thankfully, you know, I think we balance each other out quite well as well. We don't sort of feed into each other. We'll try and uplift each other in those scenarios, but yeah, I think there is a lot. I think men are just, without being sexist or stereotypical, but I think, you know, we're just all built very differently, isn't it? So
Definitely,
it
yeah.
can be it's hard for them as well to understand. We've got hormones raging through our body. Our bodies suddenly look very different.
Change, yeah.
You know, we're trying to juggle so much. It's a hell of a lot of pressure. It's a lot. And I think it's hard for sometimes for men to understand that.
Yeah. So I think that's an important message, you know, looking at how to maybe more kind of awareness about how, you know, partners can support
Yeah,
their partner through that postnatal journey, really, and understand that obviously the pregnancy's happened and the child's now here, but then there is something else. There's that ongoing journey in terms of
yeah,
kind of that evolution of that mother as well, and how we can support that as well. And I think we're quite lucky within Sikhi that we have that kind of within Sangat, we have that strong sisterhood and that very
yeah,
empowering kind of network for women. Just as, you know, the Martha Sahib Kaur Educational Trust promotes kind of that education of women, empowering women, that we are kind of
yeah,
we have many roles and we can adapt to take many roles. One as a mother, you know, and in going out into the world of work, and as a wife, for example. So I think that's
yeah,
a very beautiful thing that should be celebrated more as well. I'm just conscious of time. I don't know how long we've got left on the live, but just as a kind of a last kind of point, Benji, what kind of advice would you give? What kind of advice would you leave the Sangat that are watching about kind of additional needs and how to respond to anyone really, not just children with additional needs?
Just anyone. I think treat them like you would treat anybody. They're human beings. They're Maharaji's creations, just like you are. Don't look down. Use it as a learning opportunity. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and educate your children. Encourage them to have friends with additional needs, and that I'd have a child with an additional need, and I did. Again, it's not something that, you know, is select to just older mothers or, you know, whatever. It can happen to anyone. And I think, yeah, just be inclusive and encourage that kind of inclusivity, both yourself and for your children.
Beautiful. I think someone's just highlighted the fact they're human beings and Maharaji's creation. I think that's a beautiful message to finish with, Benji.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thank you so much for having me and for supporting, you know, promoting mental health awareness and also additional needs and, yeah, what the work that needs to be done within our community.
Thank you, Benji. And also, I think we've had quite a few questions about when's the book coming out?
Oh, that will hopefully be near around Guru Nanak Dev Ji's birthday. It's aimed at children around 4 or 5, and it's very simple, just sharing Margie's message. It was to share some of my dad's simple knowledge, but also to try and bring in the message of, you know, we're all different, but we should all celebrate each other.
Beautiful.
So yeah.
We'll definitely kind of look out for that. And anyone who's not following Benji, please kind of log onto Benji's site. I think you do amazing work, and you've kind of been an advocate for kind of looking at postnatal depression and also anyone kind of with additional needs and promoting that inclusiveness as well. So I think that's all, Benji. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much. I know how busy you are as well, so taking the time out to talk to us. And we enjoy kind of all seeing your posts, you know, on a regular basis, and looking at your beautiful family and seeing your family as a really, you know, really inspirational in terms of the work that you're doing as well. So thanks for sharing that as well with the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Guji ka khalsa.
Bye.
Guji ki fateh. So yeah, just thanks for joining us on this talk, on this live. Please also look out later today as well for another live that we're doing, talking about Seva. So we'll be joined by Savine Benji and also Sathnam Benji as well, talking a lot more about kind of Seva and things like that as well. So please join us later as well. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.